You're listening to episode number 68 of the AlaREIA Masterclass Podcast. What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. I'm here in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. So glad you decided to join us today for another episode of the Masterclass Podcast. We are Alabama's only real estate podcast. A lot of times we get great local guests in on our show. Sometimes we get some national guests. So we've got a local guest that we're going to get to in just 1 second, who's in our little office studio. Just obviously, like I always do, got a couple of announcements for you guys. Our next REIA meeting is on May the 10th. Crap. I'm going to have to redo that. When is the next REIA meeting? Is it the 10th or the 12th? No. I'm past that already.
Okay.
It's May. It is the 10th. Our next... I'll call it. Our next REIA meeting is on May the 10th. We're always the second Thursday night of every single month. Just FYI, I'm going to say this a few times. This will be the first meeting we do not have at the Embassy Suites. This is the only month we won't do that. We're going to go somewhere else and then we're going to come right back. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. You need to check our meetup page. Go to meetup.com/AlaREIA, or you can go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/AlaREIA, AlaREIA. We also have our 3-day workshop coming up again. We do these quarterly. Our next one is coming up May 31st through June the 2nd. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. To get more information on that or to get registered, you can go to AlaREIAworkshop.com. Again, it's AlaREIA workshop.com. So let's get straight to the show. I want to introduce Mr. Bobby Jones to everybody. How are you doing today, Bobby?
Doing well.
I'm so glad you're here. Shaking my hand. People on the podcast can't see you shaking my hand. Bobby, you're local to Birmingham. Been doing a lot of stuff here in Birmingham for a long time. Very excited to learn more about what you're up to here locally.
All right.
Also, you got a background in appraising.
Yes,
I really want to spend a lot of the show talking about appraisals, tax appraisals, how to potentially protest our taxes, what that process looks like, if you're willing.
Sure.
Love to get into that, but why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your story, how you got into real estate, and then what you're doing today and how you got there.
All right, great. First, let me just tell you, Brian, that I really admire what you're doing here in Birmingham, Alabama. It's huge what you've got going on right now. My background, I started probably about 20 years ago getting into appraisals, and I've done that for a long, ever since. I've done my knowledge and value is extensive. I've got multiple designations. I've got a background in working for the government. I've got a background in doing fee appraisals for commercial, residential. I'm a flipper. I'm a home builder. I have a background in mortgages as well.
You're doing it all.
I've done it all, and and I'm just trying to see what the next path takes me. But like you said in previous shows and previous meetings, it's all about networking. It's all about building contacts. That's why I'm here today with you, and awesome. Let's see where we can go with it.
So, Bobby, you've been doing this for what sounds like 20 years.
Yes, sir.
And you're a young guy.
I'm 39 years old, and
so 39 minus 20.
Right, 19. I've been doing it a long time, and when you're young, and I encourage young guys to get out there and do it.
Yeah.
When you're young, it's easier to network. You're going to get a lot of grief when you're younger because people's not going to take you serious. But
totally.
Get out there and get your bruises.
That's right. That's right. So that's just kind of. I just have a natural question because I've only been in real estate for 6 years.
Yes, sir.
2012. There's been some bumps in the road. Maybe not for you personally, maybe so, but I want to ask you about that. There's been a lot of bumps in the road for just the general public when it comes to real estate over the past 20 years. How have you been able to be in real estate for this long?
By not putting all my eggs in one basket. Now,
Okay.
A lot of people will have some diversity on that theory. For me, it's been best to be knowledgeable, to stay in the field. I've had a lot of opportunity to do work in other fields, but if it was in mortgages or if it was in appraisals or if it was in flipping, I always tried to keep it relative to real estate, what I got involved in. And that way, if something if I wasn't able to make money in one area, I was able to do it in another.
So it sounds to me like you're saying that depending on what the real estate climate is doing, I can deploy certain strategies for certain types of markets.
Correct.
Do you want to kind of shed a little bit more light on that? Like if the market starts to tank tomorrow, which is not going to happen overnight, but if you start to see a progression, some steady statistics start coming out where home sales are down, prices are down, Bobby, what is your next move?
Well, there's always got to be a way. The world's got to circulate. That's the first thing that everybody needs to understand is that, there was a crisis in 08 and it's coming again. It will come again at one time, and the strong survive. It's the people who are willing to find the niche. For example, the criterion financing changed huge in 2008, and the appraisal process and things going to the AMCs, appraisal management companies, and just lots of things changed, scared a lot of people. But you just got to understand that it's going to work. People's got to buy houses, and
people need a place to live.
Exactly. So, you just got to. The people who figure out the way to do it's the ones who survive.
Yeah. So you figured out how to do it. You stayed in the game for 20 years. Tell me what you're up to today.
Well, prior to 2008, I was doing really, really well with appraisals. Just doing appraisals, and in fact, I didn't really have much time to do anything else. I had many clients in Alabama, out of state as well. And when the market did go down for a while, I had to try to figure out another route to, because I saw the writing on the wall. Basically, I worked for the government for valuing property. I also flipped homes. Networking's been key for me. I'm involved with some guys that are doing it a lot bigger than me. Some of those guys, and just hanging around those type of guys and learning and trying to follow their footsteps. Basically,
never stop learning.
Exactly.
You got it. If you feel like you got all the answers,
exactly,
you're doomed. For sure. So you mentioned working for the government,
yes, sir,
doing appraisals. I really want to talk about this because I think that this is going to help a lot of people who own property and may not know. Especially, we have a lot of out-of-state listeners.
Yes, sir.
Our third most downloaded state for this podcast is California. So if you've got a lot of California investors listening to this podcast who may own or may want to own property in Birmingham, and they get the tax cards in the mail, and they see that they've got a property in maybe a Fairfield, maybe maybe a C or midfield, like a C or a D kind of Inslee area, and it's valued at 60, 70, 80,000, and we kind of know because we're here that kind of seems a little bit crazy. And I'm not sitting here putting all this on the tax assessors either. How would one go about, like from the very beginning stages? I get my tax card and I think it might be high.
Right.
What's the very first step I might take to try to get that number lowered? Well,
the government entities, they want, in different counties, they want the value to be correct. That's why you have...
Hold on. I almost want to stop you right there.
Right.
Because you said they want the value to be correct.
Right.
Do they really? They want the property taxes, don't they?
Well, they do. They want, of course, revenue is revenue, but at the same time, it's got to be in equity. They want it to be right. They want to be... it's a public service, so they want people to have confidence in them, and that and have the public trust.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm smiling. I'm grinning about that because I've had some bad experiences. So no, that's why we try to get an expert in here. Right. Let's dispel the myths that they're not out to get you.
Exactly.
So step one in the process is understanding that the government's not out to get you.
Correct.
That they want the value to be right. I might have a suspicion. I get the tax card in the mail, and it just maybe I'm not super educated about it, but I can go to Zillow, and maybe it's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 higher than Zillow. I can do some maybe a realtor friend or maybe another investor friend. They all kind of agree, hey, that's a little high.
Right.
So it kind of gets in my mind, hey, you know what, this thing's high. I should protest this. What's the next step I should take in that process?
Sure. Well, the first thing you have to kind of realize is people that, I'll just touch on Zillow for a moment. A lot of those values circulate, and they're taking into account foreclosures, liquidation sales, and And valuations are different on anything. Like I said, I'm a licensed, I'm certified through the Alabama Real Estate Appraisers Board. I'm also certified through the Alabama Department of Revenue as a mass appraiser. So that every appraisal has a different intended use, whether it be for a refinance, whether it be for a purchase, whether it be for a tax assessment. That's the first thing. So to your question, the first steps you take when you receive that card in the mail, you have the option. And first of all, you're not going to receive that card unless your property value has raised that year.
Right.
And if you think that it's high, the first thing you need to do is just check the box that you would like to protest, that value. I will say that visuals are huge when you go in to protest a.
Well, we're gonna get there.
Okay.
We're gonna get there. Like what you actually do when you sit down with the appraiser. But the first step is I get the card in the mail, and the card, there's a box on there that you can check. I would like to. And
they change. Sometimes the actual from county to county, the format of it will change. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about specific to our to this county, yeah, you would check the box and send it in.
And just say that I would like a hearing or something like that. Okay.
Correct.
You mentioned something too about there's different uses for appraisals. There's refinances. There's all sorts of different things for tax appraisal. Explain why that might matter to an appraiser.
Well, as far as a refinance and a purchase, or
like if there are different uses for an appraisal. Like why would I need an appraisal? There are lots of different reasons why I might need one. Right. We know that. I feel like you kind of were hinting at that it might affect the value. Does it not?
Well, market value should be market value.
Right.
However, if we're talking refinance and purchases versus a tax assessment, you got to understand that when you have an appraiser come out to appraise your home individually for a refinance or for a purchase, they're coming inside your home. They're getting in depth on that one particular property.
Okay.
Now, when you're talking about mass appraisal or tax assessment, they're looking at things on a huge scale over thousands of parcels.
That's a good distinction. I'm glad you brought that up. So what I hear you saying is when the county comes and assesses the property value, mm-hmm. they're not coming into the home. It's almost like a drive-by.
If it's a new construction, they have the opportunity, but as a whole, as the home gets older, as they're revaluing the property, typically do not get on the inside of the home.
How big of a difference do you think that makes?
Well, it could make a huge difference because if you ride by the home and it appears to be, in very good condition, but on the inside it's got mold issues or changed or falling apart, then you don't know that from the street.
Totally.
Right.
So that comes back to visuals, which we're going to talk about here in a second when you go to try to prove, I guess, your case. So I just think that was a really good point you made, because that's not something I've never really thought about or taken into account, is a mass appraisal, which you could be a certified person to do mass appraisals. You're looking at the whole. You're not really looking at them in the micro individually, going into them.
Well, it's that, and it's also there's a different set of parameters that you're valuing the property over. An individual, a fee appraiser, which I am as well. You take in consideration local contractor costs when you're doing the cost. There's three approaches of value. There's a cost approach, there's an income approach, and there's a sales comparison approach. And with the government, they're using a manual that is distributed by the state, and those cost values are given, and then they use their own different indexes.
I want to talk about that. I've never heard of that. Never heard about that before. There's a manual that's distributed throughout the state. Am I getting into uncomfortable territory?
Well, that's not, well, that's probably a little above what we can probably go into, but that is.
But what does it do, and what is it talking about?
Well, it would take a long time to explain that, because it would take a long time to explain how to be an appraiser or how to be a mass appraiser. But that is how you value properties based on cost, what it would take to build a home from ground up, replacement cost and such. And so you do that, but you do that based off a cost manual. You have to have somewhere to get a price per square foot of these things.
Okay,
and that can be different when you're dealing with a mass appraisal that you're using manuals that are mandated for you to use versus if you're out in the world using a Marshall Swift cost handbook. There can be differences.
Okay, I understand now. And you said there are 3 different approaches to appraising a property.
Correct. Yes, sir. Well, if they are warranted. I mean, you wouldn't use an income approach on a property that's not an income producing property.
No, absolutely. I'm with you, but where I'm getting with that question is, does the county or would a government employee take that into account as well? Like if it's rented, they want to know that it's a rental and they want to know how much it's rented for so they can do those calculations. Or no?
Well, again, I'm not every county's different for one, totally. but yes, they won't. When you go into talk about your tax assessment, you definitely want to bring all the information that you have that you think's wanted, and yes, they will look at anything and everything, especially if it's an income producing property. Definitely want to see rent rolls, your vacancies, whatever that you have.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that's important.
If you're dealing with commercial property, you want to see what cap rates you're using, all that kind of thing.
100%. No, I think that's important stuff. So so the first step is we're going to check the box on the mailer and on the tax assessment card, send it back just saying that, hey, you know what, I think this might be a little high. I may want a hearing, I may want to protest it. Right. So we get that scheduled.
Right.
I think they send an email or they call you, whatever it is, or they send you a letter and they tell you you're supposed to be here on this date at this time.
Right.
At that point, it's like an initial hearing. There's like many steps to this, but this is like the.
Well, again, different.
I'm talking about Jefferson County because I've got experience with it.
Well, all right, we'll talk about it. I have some knowledge on that. I'm not going to represent any particular county. I'll give you public knowledge that I know.
For sure. And Bobby, I'm sorry, that's not even really the question I was asking. The question I'm asking is, what's the next step in the process?
Sure. If you're talking about Jefferson County per se, if you go in to the county to protest your taxes, yes, you have an initial hearing officer. You'll have what's called an informal basic hearing, and you'll have the option at that hearing to either plead your case then, or you can take it a step further and talk to 3 board members.
You can just completely bypass that.
You can I'm not gonna suggest you do it either way. But the hearing officers are the actual appraisers, really? And they are the ones that are out in the field doing it every day.
Gotcha.
The board members have the authority and have the ability to look at it further and see if there's something that the appraiser missed.
Yeah, no, that's good information to know. So I'm gonna talk about my experience real quick, because I've done this 2 years in a row now, and just so we get the dates right for Jefferson County at least, because that's the only county I have experience with, is the tax cards usually come in April or May.
Yes, sir.
So they're coming. It's coming up. So if you have property in Jefferson County, just know that you could get a tax card if, like as Bobby said earlier, if that number goes up. I think they just changed that over the past couple of years. You used to get one no matter what, and now recently you only get one if the value is going to go up. So when I get one of these cards, I check the box. I want a hearing, and I usually get a letter in the mail. I think that's what the process is. I get a letter in the mail, and they tell me exactly the day and the time when I'm supposed to be there. And if I can't make it, I think they can reschedule it for me. But I go to the Board of Equalization, which is at the Jefferson County Courthouse. You have to use the other elevator. You have to use the elevator down by the driver's licenses, and you go up to the 5th floor, I think it is.
Correct.
And you go in, you talk to a county appraiser. And you for me, in my experience, I actually have a video on this. You can go to our YouTube page, and you can just go to the AlaREIA YouTube page. I have a whole video on me actually going to the courthouse, talking to a county appraiser, and he was glad to do it, and very professional. He did a great job. I protested taxes on. I've got a house in Inglenook that they had it appraised, the tax assessed at like $60,000. I got it down to like 33, and then they came back the very next year and went back up to like 58, and then I got it back down to 33, and I'm assuming I'm going to get another one this year at 58.
Well, that's one thing. Every year stands alone, and it is subject to change the next year. And how did it lower? If you don't mind me asking, did you have to see a board member? Did they appraise it later?
The first time I had to go to the board of like, there's like 10 people in there. There's a bunch of people in there. You might have been in there. No, I'm just kidding. There's a bunch of people in there. And then the second time I did it, when I said, look, you guys just went back down, or you went right back up to the same number when you just agreed with me that it was down.
Right.
And so I did not have to go back to the board. They lowered it on their own. And the really cool thing is that I've got a commercial building that was tax assessed at I can't remember exactly, 435 or 465. And I went through the same process. I didn't even have to go through the hearing, to the second hearing. They brought it all the way down to like 280.
Wow.
And I think I was asking for 280, and they brought it all the way down. So the point that I guess that me and Bobby are telling you is, it doesn't hurt to do it.
Right.
It doesn't, especially not for the experience. Even if you only think it's off by a few thousand, I would go through the experience. What do you think about that? To learn the process.
If you're asking me, I'm a learner. I like to learn, and you don't want to just. I think going in, you should have a valid reason why you're going. But if you do, listen, it's wrong to overappraise something just as it is to underappraise something. So you want it right, whatever that is, whatever that number is.
I agree, and I think if you feel like your property value is over assessed, then you should go through this process, if for nothing else but to learn. So Bobby, last thing I want to ask you about this, and we'll kind of put a bow on this and go on to something else, is because you mentioned it a second ago and I cut you off, what should we take into a hearing?
Well, that's going to depend on whether it's a commercial property or residential property, but again, if you're taking in sales information, if that's going to be your argument, if you've gotten some comparable sales from a realtor friend, I would make sure that those sales were within the fiscal year of the time you were talking about. Because if they're outside of that fiscal year, and I'll let you touch on that because you're not.
No. Well, you said, what do you mean by fiscal year? I know, but I want to make sure everybody else knows.
When you pay your taxes, or when you're talking about a value, they're in the rears. So from 10/1/16 to 10/17, that's going to be your 2018 tax year. So the sales are going to have to, a lot of times people will take sales information extremely current to argue their taxes, maybe that the day of, or within the last few months, and that's not relevant to the tax year that they're arguing. But that's the first thing. You want to make sure your tax sales your comparable sales are relevant to the tax year you're talking about. You also want to make sure that their sales are not liquidation sales, distress sales, foreclosure sales, estate sales, short sales, that type of thing. And if you're going to argue that the condition is not what the county or what the entity that you're talking to says it is, I would have visuals. I would have some pictures. Mold issues, big issue, whatever the issues are that you're trying to relay in terms of septic issues, vacancies, those type of things.
So vacancies, a lot of maintenance issues, those are things that could affect, if you're talking about the income approach.
Well, yeah, and what I was talking about is the home has been sitting vacant for a while, or if the copper's been stripped, that type of thing, if it's unsound.
Yeah. That's awesome. Anything else you can think of to add if I want to try to protest my taxes, just maybe some tips, some other tips that maybe we haven't talked about that you could think of?
If you're, if you're bringing your information in, just try to, make sure that you have all your vacancies and your rent rolls and all that together. If you're talking about commercial property, or if you're talking about or something you're renting out.
Right, for sure. Yeah, as much information. It's probably not a bad thing to bring in as much information as you have.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, cool. Thank you for shedding some light on that. I appreciate it. I want to, before we go, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about, kind of what you're up to a little bit. You appraise, not just, you do some I guess you do private appraisals and stuff like that. Used to, not anymore?
Well, no, I do. I'm still active. I own an appraisal company.
So there's going to be some people also listening to this who are flipping houses, right, who are doing some stuff. That's usually one of the things, when you're flipping a house and you've got it on the market, you get it under contract to sell it, that's usually one of the hurdles that you have to get over is the appraisal from the bank.
Right.
Any tips on someone who's listening to this who may be a rehabber, any tips that you could do to help the appraiser, or not really, they're just kind of stand on their own and they're going to do their own thing?
Well, yeah, you really don't have a dog in that fight, because generally the bank's going to go through some type of a rotation list through an appraisal, or if it's an in-house appraiser, or go through an appraisal management company. Mm-hmm. You're not going to really have, as a buyer or seller, any contact. Well, the seller may have a little bit of contact, but there's nothing really you can do other than to open the door and let them see the house.
Right.
But the best thing to do is just have, if you can, have a little bit of knowledge of. Are you talking about from standpoint of flipping the house, or the ARV?
Yeah. Yep.
You really want to. You should, if you're a flipper, you should have a really good idea what that house is going to sell for before you ever, or what it's going to appraise for.
Right.
Before you sell it.
Right, but and I know, right, you're a rehabber as well. You're going to push that envelope as much as you can.
Exactly, but I would say from my standpoint is that there's so many things that affect value. You have the buyer, what they're willing to pay. You have the realtor, what they're listing it for, whether it be for a quick sale to get the commission quick, whether it be how long you're really wanting the house to be on the market. Then you also are dealing with the appraised value. What type of comps is this particular appraiser using? Because every appraisal, if you got 10 different appraisals, they're going to be different, because you're only talking about an opinion of value. You have an opinion of value from the buyer, you have an opinion of value from the appraiser, you have an opinion of value from the realtor. So all these things have got to come into play. So right, you really need to know. Basically, my best advice is to, if you have a way to get on MLS, if you have a friend that's a realtor, before you try to buy something and renovate it, you need to get a great idea of what the sales and listings and pending transactions and things that are contingent in that area are within the last 6 months. And I wouldn't bypass sales looking for other things. I would start within a half mile and work my way out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next, is some parameters to work within. If I'm not an appraiser, but I might rehab a house and I want to know value. What are the most important things that I need to take into account if I am a realtor and I've got access to the MLS and I've got this deal, it could be a great deal. I want to make sure I'm actually using the right comps.
Right.
What are some things I need to make sure to compare? Bedrooms and baths, type of house, square footage.
Man, you just named it. I would. You definitely want to look at square footage.
I was going to say rank them. What's most important?
I would say location. I would not
proximity.
I would not skip a home. Let's say you have a home on the same street that looks like your home, same square footage, and then basically the same condition, but you see a house down the road that's kind of similar to yours that sold for more. You're shooting for the stars, like, my house can sell for that one. Well, I would really look strong at the one that just sold right beside you, because that's going to be a major comp. And you got to think in the mind of an appraiser when you go back and try to sell the house, what home are they going to use as a comparable sale?
What about what it looks like on the inside?
That's huge, but
what if the house right next door to me just sold, but it's not a flip? It's all the original stuff, which is not bad. It just hasn't been updated.
Right.
And then I got mine and I did update it. Is that play a factor, or not as much as you're kind of saying?
Well, it does. And I have had appraisals come back where they used homes that were not remodeled against my home that was remodeled. And I'm sure you've dealt with it.
Yeah.
With that. And that's just
it's frustrating.
A price that and you can try to argue that and try to get another appraisal or review appraisal or whatever. And those are just types of things you're going to deal with. But, of course, most logical people would comp your home with a home that's been remodeled if you've remodeled it.
Right. And just kind of the last question I have about this is, and I know that I've been told that it really doesn't do much good, but what are the repercussions? Say you just know in your mind you got a bad appraisal.
Right.
What kind of steps could you take to potentially get that corrected? Well,
there's been cases where where the buyer or seller has contacted the appraiser if they had knowledge of what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Best thing to do is try to get another appraisal. Try to get your information submitted to whoever you're dealing with, your mortgage company, what your reasoning is to your argument is, mm-hmm. and maybe they'll relay that to the appraiser. A better comp, for example. Hey, my home's remodeled. This home you use is dated and hasn't been remodeled since the 1970s. Where's your adjustment in this? Put the weight back on the appraiser to see, because that's something that they could be reprimanded through the appraisal board if they're not making proper adjustments or using proper comps.
So you mentioned that word adjustments.
Right.
What is that?
Well, what you do, what an appraisal is when you're using sales. Typically, an appraiser will use at least a minimum of 3 sales in their appraisal report, and you have what's the subject, that's your home, and you're trying to compare the comparable sales to the subject. So, if you see an appraisal report, you'll have a grid, and you'll have the 3 sales that you're using, and what you want to do is you want to make the sales like the subject. So, if your home has a garage, but the first comparable you're using does not have a garage, then you want to make whatever you think that adjusted value. Let's say if you think it's, according to the market, it's a $5,000 increase in value to have it in a garage. So you will put a plus 5,000 and raise that value up for the comparable and make it like the subject. So you're basically changing values up or down to compare it and make it like the subject. That goes for square footage, location, financing, all those type of things.
That's awesome information, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Bobby, you're buying houses.
I do.
Tell people how they can get a hold of you if they have a house they want to sell you.
www.yellowhammerproperties.com. My name is Bobby Jones. I have a wonderful team. Thomas Phillips, Mark Wilson, both shareholders in my company. Jackson Ramey, he runs operations. I'm good friends and great friends with one of the biggest flippers in Birmingham. You and I both know him. And he's taught me a lot over the years, and I value his friendship, Mr. Matthew Gregory. Give him a shout out too.
Yeah, I asked you to tell people how they could get a hold of you.
I wanted to give everybody a shout out.
And you're just
gotta do it.
Hey man, you gotta where you're getting your education. You gotta make sure that they're taken care of.
Exactly.
Well, we had Matthew on the show a couple weeks ago, but we had to get him in here with other people. He wouldn't just come in on his own. But appreciate you coming on the show, man.
It was a pleasure, man.
Great information. Very knowledgeable. Anytime you can surround yourself with people who've been in the business for as long as someone like Bobby has been, and Bobby, you come to the AlaREIA meetings as well.
Yes, sir.
So next time you guys come to our meetings, come shake hands and meet Bobby Jones and meet his team. They come to our group as well. So
I would encourage you guys to come out to this next one. Brian's going to be speaking.
Yeah, well, so
most anticipated event yet.
It's funny you say that. It's already happened because this doesn't come out until April 17th. So that one already happened a few days ago. You already missed it, but you can get on YouTube and watch it. Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate you coming in, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, say it every time, guys. Hit that subscribe. I've got like 4 things. I usually never edit, but I'm gonna have to go back and edit. Guys, hit that subscribe button. I give up.
Come back tonight.
Oh my gosh. All right, we're just gonna end it there now. I'm just kidding. Hit the subscribe button. We love you guys so much. Rate us and review us. See you guys next time. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. I can't talk.
When he was asking about the different value about like mass appraisals, like basically saying why is it so high or like why it went back up.
Yeah.
I was kind of wanting to yell, hey, explain to him it's a broad mass appraisal. That's why every year it's going back up because they don't have enough people to go to every single house.
Really?
You know what I mean?
Well, every year stands alone. So what? And I didn't touch on this there, but what happened to you was more likely as the value was changed, but then it overrides. It can go back to what it was, especially if you went to a board member. The appraiser is who turns around the next year and decides what the value is, and it's kind of like a cycle. It goes through the.
We're gonna end up having to do it every year. What do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think the values are wrong.
Well, I got an actual appraisal. That's how I feel like the numbers are wrong.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be a tool to take, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean,
appraisal.
Yeah, but again, it just depends. I mean, there sometimes. You want to have confidence in the appraisal you're looking at, but you want to do your due diligence to look at the report, make sure it's a good report.
Yeah.
Well, it is a good report if it favors me, right? You don't feel that way?
Dude, no. I've had some bad ones.
I said if it favors you, then it's a good one.
I'm glad I didn't wear my red polo, man. I had one on yesterday, just like that.
I've done 3 podcasts today, and I was like, dang, I'm gonna have to shave this morning.
So the other one wasn't live? The one that you did earlier? That was on Facebook earlier? Or?
Yeah, that was live.
That one was live, okay.
Yeah. This one is not on Facebook. I just
yeah.
I don't always use this is really more for backup.
Right.
It's more for backup audio in case I mess something up here, which I didn't.